Warning that fewer mainland tourists could devastate retail trade. The number of dead goes up in West Africa Ebola outbreak. And another three-day truce in Gaza. But will this one hold?
Good evening. A new study commissioned by the retail industry is warning that a 20% drop in individual mainland tourists would lead to economic losses of more than $40 billion. The dire warning comes as the government considers whether to impose a cap on visitors from across the border. The retail industry commissioned economist Lam Pun Lee to go through government statistics on the city's economy. Lam found that between 2004 and 2013, the individual visit scheme had helped bolster the local retail trade, pushing up spending by $819 billion. That increase was even higher than GDP growth during the same period. Now the retail sector is worried that a drop in mainland tourists will impact a lot more than just retailers.
So to quantify it is pretty difficult, but we suspect if the retail sales or volume that go down, the first hit will be the income in the 35,000 employees in this sector. And then the ripple effect actually will spill off to supply chain, advertising, wholesale, other tourism-related ones.
She said various tourism-related industries hire 1.2 million people. Lam has forecast a 20% cut in mainland individual visitors would lead to economic losses worth $40 billion, and more than 10,000 people would lose their jobs. Rising tensions stemming from the people of Hong Kong complaining about an influx of mainland tourists have led the government to consider reducing visitor numbers. The retail trade has submitted the report to the government, hoping it will consider the impact on businesses very carefully. The report also urged the government to develop more tourist and shopping attractions along the border to minimize the impact on the city. Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development Greg So said he understands that mainland individual travellers have a direct impact on the retail industry, but he stopped short of saying whether a cap should be imposed.
The Office of the Privacy Commissioner for Personal Data has found that most people consider person-to-person marketing calls to be a nuisance. The office is calling on the government to expand the Do Not Call registry to cover these calls. Stephanie Choi reports.
Ever got a call from a stranger trying to sell you something?
Oh man, I get calls from people selling me stuff all the time. Super annoying.
I really want to know how they get my telephone number.
Sounds familiar? Back in 2011, the Office of the Privacy Commissioner for Personal Data asked the government to include the blocking of person-to-person marketing calls in the Personal Data Privacy Ordinance.
The Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development concluded that the time was not appropriate to follow our suggestion because they have used the results of the survey that the government conducted in year 2008. This year's survey results indicated that the situation has really drastically deteriorated.
Right now, the ordinance does not cover unsolicited calls to unspecified recipients. The Office 2014 survey found that 91% of respondents had received person-to-person marketing calls. Almost a quarter of them got at least 6 calls per week. About 20% would hang up immediately, while 28% would stay on the line a little while and then hang up if they lost interest. And only 6% of respondents said they had benefited from such calls.
There is a need, really, for us to come up with ways and means to ensure that these calls, if to be conducted at all, should be more consumer-friendly.
The Consumer Council suggested that the companies should exercise self-discipline.
I would call them, to deploy much more resources to audit themselves They can hire independent auditors, to be mystery, shoppers, or maybe callers. They can have more, surveys to look at, the satisfaction of the recipients.
The council also stressed that if it bothers them, consumers should tell unwelcome callers firmly not to use the personal information for telemarketing purposes. Stephanie Choi, TVB News.
Rescuers are finding the going tough in Yunnan province, the scene of Sunday's devastating earthquake, which left at least 410 people dead and 2,300 injured. In mountainous areas, many roads are still blocked, while the threat of flooding from quake-created lakes or rain-induced landslides remains a constant worry for rescuers. Authorities have already evacuated residents from towns and villages near these lakes. Some 10,000 troops are in the worst-hit areas, using pickaxes and backhoes to clear roads and dig residents from collapsed homes. The government also has sent thousands of tons of material, including food, medicines and sleeping material like tents and blankets.
Japan says it finds itself in a worsening security environment as North Korea continues to develop its missile capability despite sanctions and its international isolation. In its annual defense report, Japan also took aim at China for engaging in what Tokyo describes as provocative behavior on the air and on the sea and in the air.
Locked in territorial disputes with some of its neighbours in the South China Sea, Japan today warned Beijing's constant muscle flexing was a threat to regional stability. In its defense white paper, Japan cited China's growing assertiveness on the sea and in the air as reasons for the country to boost its military. The annual report, released after cabinet approval, says Japan is particularly concerned about China's establishment of an air defense identification zone that includes disputed islands in the East China Sea. Japan scrambled jets in response to Chinese military flights 400 times last year. The Japanese report says the zone is China's attempt to unilaterally change the status quo, escalate the situation which could cause unintended consequences in the East China Sea. Then there's North Korea. The paper said Pyongyang had improved its long-range missile capability and the militarization of nuclear warheads. It felt this could give North Korea confidence to engage in more provocative behavior. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has embarked on an aggressive program of military spending, which has also seen his administration approve changes to the country's pacifist constitution, allowing Japan to play a bigger military role overseas and respond to requests for help from allies. Japan also managed to upset its neighbour South Korea by using the white paper to claim the Dokdo Islands, called Takeshima in Japanese. Today, the South Korean Foreign Ministry summoned a senior Japanese diplomat to register its displeasure.
With the death toll in the Ebola outbreak in West Africa up to nearly 900.